Well, she's done for. David Cameron has given her his backing. What could be better? What could possibly go wrong? Where did he do so? At a convocation of the Bullingdon Club? Was there a pig's head involved? What can we say about David Cameron, the most disgraced and disastrous Tory leader in living memory, the man who put the Tories in all this trouble, says, steady as she goes, fellows, let's all get behind Theresa May. Well, it all, of course, started long ago. She was an unelected Prime Minister and an unelected Tory party leader. She was never tested in the fire of a leadership campaign. If she had been, she might have been found wanting in time. But she was not. But she's been found wanting ever since. She completely lacks the vocabulary, the iconography. She lacks the facility to do the job that she is doing, which would be a difficult enough job at any time. But in the middle of Britain's biggest involvement or disengagement from Europe since Dunkirk, well, hey, you need to be a bit sharper as a tool in the box in order to pull that off. And if one thing has been demonstrated, beyond any possible contradiction, is that Mrs. May isn't very sharp. Now, when she strode to the rostrum in one pair of shoes, ready to change into a second pair of shoes, she must have been hoping that the conference coverage would fasten on the sparkling jewels in the green flat shoes that she'd brought with her in her handbag. Actually, that's all gone by the by. The fact that she was wearing a bracelet which was painted by Trotsky's girlfriend, the fact that she was wearing a dress by a designer called Daniel Blake, well, she'd have gotten off lightly if those were the things that we were gossiping about. But between the set falling to pieces behind her, like a scene from The Office or The Peep Show, between the Joker, who should surely have been spotted as he was on the conference floor and he was clearly under the age of 70, strode forward with a P45 and delivered it into the Prime Minister's hands in the era of terrorism, when Britain is under critical alert. Somebody got to hand the Prime Minister on live TV a piece of paper that turned out to be her P45 and tell her that Boris Johnson had told him to deliver it for her. The fact that she was then rendered literally speechless, to the point where every single report of her conference performance used the word excruciating. You know what excruciating means? It means that you're curling your toes, you're biting your nails, you're biting your knuckles, you're willing this thing to end. You're hoping that the ground will open up and swallow her, as she must indeed have been herself. Well, none of that actually happened, but of course, as soon as she had finished speaking, I was listening on the radio. It's only later I saw the pictures, see the letters, magnetic letters, tumbling off a wall to which they were stuck. How's that for 2017? Maybe she didn't have an autocue. Maybe she had a fellow with a big board, a blackboard with chalk, chalking out the words for her. Maybe that was the problem. But no sooner had the whole thing finished when the coup began. Now, of course, the supporters of Theresa May are poo-pooing this coup. They're saying that the stalking horse, Grant Shapps, lacks credibility. Well, as I know him very well, I can vindicate that judgment in its entirety. Indeed, when he said he had 30 names, I was only mildly surprised because I knew he had many names, many aliases, because, hey, that's why he was kicked out of the chairmanship of the Conservative Party, when it was found that he was making money on the side without declaring it, because, hey, he was using his other names. So 30 names, Shaps, we might well have called him at the time. But if he has 30 MPs and needs 48, then let me quote Chairman Mao for the second week in succession. When someone's up to their neck in water, it takes but a ripple to drown them. And believe me, 18 MPs is but a ripple. And there are any number of issues, events, dear boys and girls, events that can easily provide that ripple, easily drown Theresa May. Now, Grant Shapps is a rum character, no doubt, but he has put his head above the parapet, though he didn't have the guts to come on this show. You might say he's not as stupid as he looks. He used to come on my show regularly on TalkSport, but that was when my teeth weren't quite so sharp. But he's declined this interview, but he's given plenty of others, and he shows no signs of backing down. And he says he has 5 former cabinet ministers who are amongst the men in suits that want to go and pay a visit on Theresa May and tell her her time is up. Whatever anyone else says, I promise you, don't underestimate this crisis. I saw up close and personal the defenestration of Margaret Thatcher. They were very confident too. He's only a stalking horse, they said of, I think it was Mayor, was it? Geoffrey Mayor? Somebody get me stalking horse Mayor, M-A-R-E. I may be misremembering that. But whoever he was a dolt. But he was a stalking horse. He was a cloud no bigger than a man's hand, who turned out to be a harbinger of great storms to come. And so, I believe, will Grant Shapps. But we'll be hearing from Peter Oborne, Associate Editor of The Spectator, a grand old man of conservative letters, in fact, one of the few men deserving of the title journalist in Britain today, in just a few minutes on that. We'll be talking to Richard Bergen, the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, one of the coming young men in the Labour Party, one of the few who stood loyally by Jeremy Corbyn in his dog days, and who's now enjoying his time in the sun because, of course, Labour had a fantastically good conference. Only the most malignant sociopath could deny that. No names mentioned. He had a great conference. Labour had a great conference. But it's a race against time now, isn't it? Jeremy Corbyn is 68 years old, and this Parliament is scheduled to last until 2022. So they've got to get the Tories into a general election before that, it seems to me. And that'll take some clever manoeuvring. And of course, who can predict the events still to come? Now, Donald Trump, just before I came on the air, told people that it was the calm before the storm. That was his quote, calm before the storm. And when people asked, what storm? He said, wait and see. Well, I'll be asking John Le Boutillier later in the show just what this storm could possibly be. It was a pretty inapt metaphor in any case, as he'd just been touring the very places that had been devastated in the storm. Never mind, he was tossing them, and I mean tossing. Yes, I mean tossing, not in the Dundee sense, but tossing kitchen rolls into the crowd, like basketballs, like children at a party, hoping perhaps that they'd scramble and fight amongst themselves for his beneficence. He's mad. I'm absolutely, utterly convinced of that. This man is in the grip of mental illness. If there is a Broadmoor in the United States, he ought to be in it, in Ward 5. Mind you, most of the people outside of Broadmoor, USville, seem to be fairly mad too. What else can you say about a man who carries in golf bags something like 30 semi-automatic weapons converted to automaticity upstairs to the Mandalay Hotel, and then smashes the windows out and murders and maims 500 people for no apparent reason? Donald Trump says it's not the time to talk about gun control in America when we've just had a mass shooting, just as it's not the time to talk about global warming when we've just had hurricanes and tornadoes and weather events that have devastated whole countries and killed large numbers of people and destroyed entire towns and small cities. It's not the time, Gov, he says, to discuss that. Well, I am going to discuss it. I don't care what their constitution says. Bearing arms as part of a well-regulated militia may well be one thing. But Mr. Paddock and his arsenal, which would have fitted out several militia, as well as explosives in his car in the car park of the Mandalay Hotel, and more explosives in his house. In fact, in his houses. Because this must surely be the first recorded incident of a mass murder shootout conducted by a multi-millionaire. Perhaps not. Perhaps all these shootouts that we've seen the United States itself be involved with have indeed been shootouts carried out by multi-millionaires. I make that point because I'm sick of hearing that this is the worst mass shooting in United States history. Well, that's true, as long as you are only counting white victims, as long as you don't count blacks, as long as you don't count the original inhabitants of what we must now call the United States of America. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. 0344 499 1000. It's me, George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows, only on Talk Radio.